Hail and well-met adventurers, this is Kash from Loreforged. I recently jumped into the discussion on the Ashes of Creation forums in regards to respawn timers in the game. The devs were inquiring about our thoughts as players on the predictability of respawn rates for general and rare mobs in the open world, dungeons, and raid settings. They really wanted to know which games did this right and what we liked about it. Let's chew the fat. Respawn timers can be crucial for your gaming experience. Well, what is a respawn timer? Well, after you kill an enemy in a game, how long does it take for that enemy to reappear? This factor can influence strategy, teamwork, and gameplay flow. Now, I believe it requires a delicate balance, one where the respawns are calibrated well enough for the player to not even notice the mechanics behind it. Now let's talk about predictable respawns versus unpredictable respawns.
Predictable? Predictable?
In my opinion, I've always liked predictable respawns, but some degree of unpredictability is warranted. For normal mobs, I have always enjoyed shorter but predictable respawns, but in unpredictable locations, so like not in the same spot every time. Now, perhaps some measure of changing the pathing or spawning location would be warranted in this case. Now, for more rare or boss mobs, I don't mind unpredictability at all. I really do enjoy some level of hunting and tracking, whereas I quest in an area, I will frequently return to the general location of a rare boss or mob to see if they're up and available. And that's when I put the word out to my guildies to get their butts moving.
Get your butt down here!
In the area of longer respawn timers, longer timers on bosses and rares can push players to coordinate their actions, encouraging teamwork and some communication. Now, this can introduce complexity and really reward good planning and execution. But how long is too long? Now, in my opinion, for rares or bosses with valuable rewards, I think like a day or maybe half a day, so like 12 to 24 hours would be a good balance. After all, a rare should not be up too often, nor at the same time each day. There should be some aspect of, as I said earlier, hunting to these mobs. I've always loved seeing messages in global chat saying, "So-and-so boss is up," and you just see people drop what they're doing and flock to a location to get a hit on the boss for a chance at the loot. Now, for shorter respawn timers, shorter timers on lesser mobs should be balanced on availability of that particular mob in the general area and the amount of players currently farming these mobs. There has to be an ebb and flow. Now, there's nothing worse than having to wait around in an area with 10 or 20 other players for respawns in hopes of getting the ones you need for a quest objective. That flat out sucks. Fighting for mobs due to unbalanced respawns causes players to clash and fight for them. Now, I would be remiss if I said that can't add a little bit of fun in the form of PvP, but it can get old for the casual player who might not have the time to sit on a spawn for hours at a time to complete their quest objectives. And yes, I absolutely believe the casual player should be considered in Ashes of Creation. Look, hardcore players, I get it. I know this game is not going to be for everyone, but wouldn't it be awesome if all players were considered? I mean, you want this game to be a banger, right?
Please be good.
Now let's talk about super rare mobs or world bosses. Now this is where I think that longer respawn times, like a full day to maybe even a full week, would be warranted. Either a daily or weekly occurrence for these mobs would be appropriate because as long as these mobs require significant coordination to defeat and provide significantly better rewards, weekly world bosses on a random longer timer can be really fun and dynamic to have in games. The kind of bosses where you and your guildmates plan for, hey, so-and-so should be up tonight or should be up sometime this week, let's be ready for it. And then they answer the call when that boss pops. You drop everything and you go now.
We gotta go now.
I absolutely love this dynamic in games. Now let's talk a little bit about mob tagging. Now I know this factor was not considered with this dev discussion, but I thought it would be kind of appropriate and worth a mention here. I have never enjoyed having mobs get tagged by another player or another group before me and then get locked out, regardless of any DPS contribution by me. Meaning, just because I was a little bit late to the party, I get locked out from receiving any loot just because somebody else tagged him first. This is a faction thing on many mobs in World of Warcraft, and it does get annoying. Let's talk a little bit about dynamic objectives. This is definitely going to be a thing in Ashes. Things like story arcs and control objectives. I'd like to see the respawn timers be based on the progression of whatever story arc is in the zone. I'm sure they will be, but as an example, if the bandits at Camp X and Y have not been dealt with, then Boss A should not be available. In short, predicates, as Steven calls them, must be met for the spawning of these particular boss objectives, which would not necessarily put them on a timer, but based on objectives reached by the players in the zone. And this already does exist in Ashes, but once these objectives are reached, how often should that boss respawn for the people that may have missed it? Maybe like a 2 to 4 hour window for the reset of the objective to allow for players to complete that objective, or maybe a respawn based on the average player's play session length, whatever that number may be. Look, I don't know all the mechanics of game development, so my opinions are just that. They're opinions. But I do know my own MMO experience. I know what I like, and I know what I don't like. I think respawn timers really are going to require a balance of challenge and accessibility. Even though longer timers can heighten the sense of accomplishment for some players, excessively long timers can alienate casual players. So striking a balance between the two allows everyone to have a shot.
Too many people!
Now, there are some games that I think did it right. I really enjoyed the way Guild Wars 2 did their world boss respawns. They were on a somewhat predictable timer, but players could plan for it and be ready. I wouldn't have minded if they were a bit more unpredictable, but it really was fun to watch people gather because they knew that a spawn was coming, and then everybody worked together, rezzing each other, which was another great mechanic. Anybody could res anybody in that game, and that was really, really cool. It might not work for Ashes, but it was cool in Guild Wars 2. As for Guild Wars 2's dynamic events or their story arcs, the balance was just right. The predicate mobs would be available at regular intervals for you to progress the event, and some of those events were really, really fun. Other games, such as World of Warcraft, have some mobs that respawn a little bit too quickly, making the loot drops not really feel rare at all. In contrast, they would also have some rare mobs that respawn at a much slower rate and have a dismal drop rate. And if that was intended, it's understandable, as loot and achievements you receive with a low drop chance do indeed give you a sense of accomplishment when you get lucky. So yeah, a delicate balance indeed. Overall, I hope my take makes some sense. I really love and appreciate these dev discussions. Intrepid is really setting the standard for collecting and implementing player feedback, so for that, I thank them. But what are your thoughts on respawn timers? How long do you think they should be for general mobs or more rare mobs? Maybe you don't even care about respawn timers, you just want it to work. Let us know in the comments below. We love shucking it up with our viewers when they leave us some good feedback. Like and sub if you enjoy our stuff, it really does help others to find us. Thanks for watching, safe travels adventurers.